Hello, welcome to Bendigo Decides. I'm Lewis Adams,
I'm Tom O'Callaghan.
and we're here to talk about state politics. All right, now some stuff has happened since the last time we caught up.
Yeah, quite a lot of stuff.
Quite a lot of stuff.
We've had the backflip Dan, as the Herald Sun's calling him today, backflipping on quite a few issues.
Okay, if you do look at today's Herald Sun, today being Friday, September 12th, you just see some very, very attractive pictures of Daniel Andrews.
They pick some great photos, don't they? I think that would be the fun part of being a photographer or a photo editor at a major paper, is just finding the most unfortunate photos you can possibly find.
My favourite is page 6, where he looks like an ogre. They've caught that posture where it's just he just doesn't. Herald Sun never catch the Labour figures in a very positive light, do they?
Well, I think I have seen some ones where they've tried to catch Liberal leaders in the light, but I think as you get up to elections, you start to see more and more the coverage becoming fairly negative towards anyone who's on the left of politics.
Now, why is the Herald Sun and some other people as well having a go at Daniel Andrews this time around?
Well, the East-West link, the ongoing saga of its court cases continues, and Daniel Andrews has backflipped, or been called Backflip Dan. Essentially, the government wants to build some major infrastructure in Melbourne around connecting up various bits of the Western Ring Road to various places out in the east of the city. They want to knock down a couple of houses to do it, well, a couple being about 90 or so, and a couple of businesses, and they want to put in some fairly big infrastructure in order to try and move freight across the city, essentially. Cars as well for, just commuters, but mainly for freight, and to try and speed up the amount of goods going through the city. Daniel Andrews has in the past said, and in fact quite helpfully in a very large graphic on the Herald Sun, in August 2014, he said, "A government that actually values our state's reputation and good name doesn't rip up contracts." But now he said that they might rip up any contracts that are signed that are relevant to the East-West link. They're just about to start building it, or they're hoping to start to build it. That's really been delayed by a couple of court cases involving people who have said, "Hey, wait a minute, what about my house? Isn't that getting bulldozed?" And some various other issues that they've had. But the government has just gotten to that point where it's about to sign the contract. So within the next couple of days or so, you can expect to see some contracts being signed. But now Labor has gone out and said that, well, we're not actually going to honour any contracts. The way they're going to do it is to not support an issue going towards the Supreme Court at the moment. Moreland City Council and Yarra City Council have taken this issue to court on planning grounds. That court case will be heard by the Supreme Court in December, and what the ALP is essentially saying is, if we do get into power, we won't support the case for the East-West link, which effectively means that the Supreme Court is highly likely to reject the case for the East-West link going ahead. So very complicated legalistic grounds, but essentially he's hoping that the court will knock back the various issues to do with the East-West link. And no, we don't know what happens if the court does in fact go out and say, you know what, the East-West link's a good idea, so, Yarra and Moreland councils, you're fine, just go away, work it out amongst yourselves. We don't know what's going to happen with that at this point in time, and really it's fairly unclear what the ALP would do if they formed government and the case, is a success, and is not a success, I should say. But I think too that this issue does come down to Backflip Dan's credibility, particularly given that he backflipped on the Shaw saga a little while ago, a very big backflip in which months after he had said, we're going to get Jeff Shaw removed from Parliament, he's evil, he's nasty, all of this, they've come up to a point where the government has brought forward a motion to try and get rid of Jeff Shaw from Parliament. The opposition said, no, that's okay, let's just leave him in. So there's, I think, two issues going on there to do with Daniel Andrews' credibility and his trustworthiness, particularly when it comes to what he says. And of course, the business community is absolutely outraged with the idea that the ALP will backflip on this, and there's a lot of money potentially tied up in this, not just in building the thing, but then in terms of productivity for the state and transport, freight and logistics movement, and also long-term cost reduction in transport across the city.
Yeah, he really seems to be playing a very political game here. Do you feel like Mapthine and the Liberal Party may have tried to push for, say, this contract to be signed before the election, or tried to push for all this to happen to try and to see if Andrews does make a fool of himself like this?
Well, it would be a pretty high-stake game if they did, because the other thing, of course, is the images of all these people who may very well be evicted. Coincidentally, in Collingwood, there's a Bendigo street where there's residents who might be pulled out of their homes. So, I mean, that's the other thing too, that it's not just about business. These kind of things are also about communities, which is why Moreland and Yarra City Councils are so outspokenly against the entire plan. And that starts to play too in what you do. I mean, you can't really stop a major infrastructure project or stop the signing of things, stop the momentum that those kind of things have just because there's an election campaign. But I don't think that they tried to time it so that it would push and test Daniel Andrews. I think it's more that Daniel Andrews has seen an opportunity. There's rumours going around that he's in focus groups. You've seen, for example, lots of people in regional areas say that the Bendigo, that the East-West link is a bit of frivolous expenditure that only really benefits Melbourne. You've seen a lot of people who say that they may have seen a lot of people say in their focus groups, why don't we spend this money on transport or on the issues down the street in my street where there's blockages or there's high volumes of traffic going around. So I think it's more that Daniel Andrews is trying to see an opportunity and trying to make an opportunity out of nothing, which is of course what you're supposed to do as an opposition leader. You don't get to fund big infrastructure when you're in opposition. I think that what the big challenge for him is how does he remain a credible leader at the very start, effectively, of an election campaign when he's done two major backflips.
This is definitely the case, and there are a lot of, criticisms being lobbied at him that if he's making these kinds of backflips before he's the premier, that if he does win the election, what kind of things will he go back on then? And I think it's a very easy thing to extrapolate, but I feel like in these two issues especially, he's playing the part of the opposition leader, and he may be doing that a little bit too well, that it is hurting his credibility. And really, I feel that if you are the opposition leader, you don't necessarily have to object to absolutely everything the government does or says. It's best to try and set your own tone as opposed to looking for dirt and lobbing it at the government. even when it is in the election campaign, when that's what everyone's doing.
But I mean, there's potential too that it could be a plus for him. As I said, it might be that focus groups in regional areas have said that they don't really care about the East-West link and they see it as a waste of money. And of course, Ballarat, there's 3 seats in and around Ballarat that are active contests at the moment where we could see a change in sitting member. It could also be that they're trying to win votes in various seats in the outer suburbs of Melbourne where maybe there's huge transport issues around public transport and around rail crossings and around old roads that have never really been built to carry the amount of traffic that they had. The flip side, of course, is that you might have problems in places like Geelong where there's an active contest going on right now between the parties to try and win it. It's certainly a seat that's in doubt, or several seats that are in doubt. And the western part of the East-West link would be of benefit to commuters coming in from Geelong and leaving at the end of the day.
So do you feel that it's more that he's prioritising which seats he's going for?
I get the sense that that's exactly what he's doing and trying to put forward an alternate policy, maybe one that's trying to peg Daniel Andrews as all about big business, whereas he's all about communities and local projects.
In the abstract, it's probably not a bad position to try and get into.
Yeah, very possibly. And I mean, transport is such a big issue. So many people will talk about public transport being a massive issue and about projects like East-West Link being just frivolous expenses. They don't necessarily pay attention to anything the government's doing in public transport. Quite a lot of what it's doing, it's spending quite a lot of money on public transport as well, as part of its major Moving Victoria infrastructure spends. I've got a feeling it's about 50-50 now on public transport and on roads. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But certainly these abstract conversations that you hear people have, that the government doesn't really care about public transport as such, they do start to play a major role in how people make their decisions rolling up to election day.
And the election day is getting closer. How do you feel that, obviously we don't know how this is all going to turn out, but how do you feel this is going to affect Daniel's image going into this campaign?
I'll be really interested to see how it affects it. I think that certainly for the opposition, you look at what they're being attacked over. It's things like backflips. So we've got, I've got a media release here on a local issue on Bendigo Hospital, in which Michael Langdon's gone out and said Labor misleads community. They lie about hospital waiting lists and other things, that maybe they are a bit quick to be very opportunistic. These kind of issues can start to play a part. I guess though it's really about Labor focusing on its election commitments really, and trying to focus on hard dollars as well. That's how you kind of combat that.
Well, let's talk about the hospital, because you said you do have a
we've
press release.
We've got a media release from Michael Langdon. A little while ago, Marie Edwards MP did a letter drop in quite a few parts of her electorate, in Bendigo specifically, on the Bendigo Hospital with... Can I do the sound effects from if this was an ad?
If this was an ad, you're hearing it on the radio.
Record surgery waiting list. War on paramedics. $2 billion cut from Victorian hospitals. Under Tony Abbott and Dennis Napthine. You're on your own.
I'm sure Miss Edwards would
written unspoken, but I should start doing ads, shouldn't I? I'd be good at that.
Marie Edwards, if you're listening to this, Tom's available to record ads.
So basically, there's an argument now about funding essentially, and who's cut what funding from where. The ALP is trying to link various federal cuts to state cuts of hospitals. These are very complicated funding realms, of course, because two spheres of government do stuff, and then there's a third sphere, the local government, which does a little bit of stuff as well, and then there's all these community groups and major businesses that also in some way fund and have a very complicated network of funding for the hospital. But of course, really, it's about trying to do a couple of things at once. One's to try and discredit Michael Langdon on a strong issue for him, because he is, one of the big wigs over at Bendigo Hospital, and also try and link up the bad news budget of Tony Abbott with the arguably much better news budgets that Dennis Napthine has put forward. I think this is going to be a continuing theme throughout the election under Tony Abbott and Dennis Napthine. You're on your own, and that's to try and put in perceptions about the budget and about cuts generally. Whether or not there actually have been major cuts, whether they're all Dennis Napthine's fault or Tony Abbott's fault is fairly debatable, but nevertheless, Michael Langdon has put out a press release to try and clarify some of the facts. He even helpfully highlights the word fact 5 times so that we know that they are indeed facts. And then, of course, goes on to quotes about character and how awful everything is for Labor and all that kind of thing. But they're talking about the key issues, more funding for the Bendigo Health and a bigger hospital all up. These are really complicated, contested fields. I'm not sure that you ever quite win these policy arguments that Michael Langdon is engaging in and that Marie Edwards is engaging in too. But I guess you've got to speak to them because they are issues that affect so many people in Bendigo.
Yeah, you've still got to talk about it even if there's not going to be a clear winner at the end. And a lot of people, I feel, don't tend to realise that something as big as, say, the Bendigo Hospital, the money tends to be coming from so many different places that it's not necessarily the clear front that it tends to assume that they're building a hospital or something like that. There's so much going on, and Bendigo Hospital being one of the bigger things that's happened in recent times in this town.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when they do realise it, you know, a lot of people, such as me, trying to scratch my head, work out, well, if this part of the funding's gone, then does that mean that this part of the funding went up? Which is, of course, what much of this is about. You know, it talks about where is it here? Got a fantastic bit. There's a lot of arguments about hospital waiting lists, about the falsification and manipulation of health data by various groups, or allegedly speaking. But also, you've got, for example, a few years ago, the federal government took away quite a lot of money and put it into siphoned it into different areas of funding so that hospitals might get the same amount of money, but they get it from completely different stats. And it's very hard to tell exactly which way those kind of break out when they do.
That's right, and you know, I'm not going to pretend that I understand exactly where all the money for the hospital is coming from. I just know that a lot of different people in different levels of government have associations with it. That's all I know.
And I think in the end, health funding, because of this, becomes an issue where voters go with their gut. So you could kind of assume, as a general rule, that people will trust Labor with health as it does with various other things, and you know, the education, for example, over the Liberal Party, because it's just so confusing that you do just go with your gut. And perhaps that's a similar thing with defence and law and order too, on the other side of the ledger.
I do feel that that's sort of where you get the strongest commitment for vote, is when you try to woo the gut.
That's right.
The heart and the gut.
Yeah,
don't worry too much about the brain.
Well, it's Aristotle, isn't it? Aristotle came up with this idea that you could have arguments in rhetoric based on logic and on facts, and you can have them based on character assessments and on emotion. And I think that's really where so many of these fights actually are. They're not necessarily about the facts, they're about character and about emotion.
Yeah, as long as there's the appearance of fact there, or as Mr. Langdon likes to put in bold, fact 5 times. But all right, what else do we have on the agenda? We've got some funding announcements, I think.
Yeah, there's been quite a few funding announcements in Bendigo recently. So the Liberal Party, for example, David Davies, the Health Minister, came up here and gave $2.6 million to build a centre of children's health in Kangaroo Flat, or at least for stage 1 of it. The Premier himself was up here at Golden Square Primary School not that long ago to open the first stage of their redevelopment work. So they've still got their 3 stage 1, they've still got stage 2 to go, so who knows, they might be up here again before the election talking about the first shot on stage 2, I don't know. And of course Labor's been up here, they sent Daniel Andrews up to do a whole bunch of things around Caliana. Of course, their $1 million for a master plan for the Caliana school redevelopment. Epsom Primary School, I think he went up there and had a poke around up there. He'd already announced some money for that, $5.7 million back in June. But I think, again, he was just up just to have a poke around, see what was what. And I think also we've seen in the last little while Jacinta Allen and Marie Edwards talk about a $10 million pool for change room upgrades, and they went and did a photo shoot for local media at one of the local change rooms at a sporting facility that should probably be turned into a multi-sex or into a single-sex facility with male and female change rooms rather than multi-sex ones.
All right. We were speculating last time we caught up for the Pro podcast, which was around the whole Jack Lyons debacle, that the Liberal Party might retract a bit from Bendigo as a result of this, which would include a cutback on things like Premier visits. But he has come back.
He did. He came back for, of course, the Golden Square stuff not that long ago. So I guess at the moment we're still remains to be seen whether or not they will abandon Bendigo to the ravages of time. But certainly I would imagine that they're not thinking about winning the seat now. So maybe some of the pork barrelling that we have seen in the last little while might not happen. But it's very early still. We don't really know yet whether they've completely abandoned it.
There is a possibility that there's the feeling that it all happened long enough ago that most people would have forgotten about it or at least put it to the back of their mind as they look at the new imagery of Michael Langdon's face.
They might very well. I think too, I mean, it's probably hard for any local candidate to get oxygen, which is why when the Jack Lyon stuff happened, that was so damaging, because he got a lot of oxygen and not for something that he,
a bit too much oxygen, yeah.
But, you know, it's possible they could start to claw back ground. I guess, though, that it's unlikely that they're going to come close to winning the seat. I would argue that they probably were never really closely in the running for the seat, other than the fact that there'd been a redistribution and it probably put it in their ground. I guess if the big thing about Michael Langdon, of course, is he is fairly well known around the community, so he's got a support base. He's got a
pretty respectable reputation,
and people know him too, which is a big thing too. You know, if you know somebody, then you can make judgments on their character, and you can make judgments on them that maybe you can't if you're a stranger in the race. So, you know, he might be able to claw back ground. I'd be surprised though if you see heaps and heaps of visits from the Premier in the lead up to the election anymore.
Yeah, Langdon did run for Bendigo East last time around, so he's got that experience as well.
Yeah, got experience. Two very experienced Liberal candidates at the moment in terms of elections and running for election. I'm actually really impressed by all 6 of the candidates who put their hand up so far. They're all people that you actually want to have in the room. I've met all of them at one stage or another now, and they're all very intelligent, all really people who understand what it is to be in the meeting, what it is to work on major projects, and all the people who you could trust to advocate for Bendigo in, you know, the backroom brawls of Victorian Parliament House.
Well, they're all very smart people. It'll be very interesting watching any debates that do happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my hot prediction. When you find out any debates, go watch them. This has been another episode of Bendigo Decides. Thank you for listening. We'll try and catch up again in the not too distant future. I have been Lewis Adams.
I've been Tom O'Callaghan.
You can, of course, find us on www.thenewlocal.net. If you scroll back a bit, there'll be some older episodes. There'll be my other podcast, Local Chats. You can find us on Twitter, @thenewlocal, @Tom Bendigo, if you want to talk to Tom specifically. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.